So as Dalton mentioned, today we're going to talk about using your sustainability data to protect your farm's legacy. So we're going to go through each one of our panelists today and give them an opportunity to talk about themselves and their operation and how they've used sustainability on their farms. So our first panelist that we're going to introduce today is Jen Sorensen. Jen serves as a communication director at Iowa Select Farms and is NPPC's past president. As communication director, Jen oversees all internal and external communications from Iowa Select, an Iowa farming business that markets more than 5 million hogs every year. Take it away.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the introduction. I want to talk a little bit about Iowa Select Farms and how the Pork Board and the Sustainable Environmental Consultants Group has really helped our business here over the last 2 years. So first, I wanted to draw your attention to the little circles on the bottom right-hand side. And you might not be able to read those, but they say people, animal, environment, and community. And these 4 pillars are very, very similar to the pork checkoff, We Care principles. And I think that's okay. I remember when we put these together at Iowa Select, calling over to Dallas Hockman and the Pork Board and saying, is it okay that our ethical principles are kind of almost exactly like your ethical principles? And they said, absolutely, that's how it should be. And so today we're going to talk more about the environmental work and targets that we do within our company, but how we define sustainability is really standing up programs, initiatives, goals, targets, and metrics within each of these 4 pillars. So I wanted to just mention that because we are talking heavily on environmental today. And manure, as a swine communicator my entire life, is my favorite subject, if you can believe it. So thrilled to be here. All right, go ahead. All right, so just a little bit about Iowa Select Farms. This is our footprint. So we are an all Iowa company. Any place you see a shaded county, we have 1 farm or many farms. We have 800 farms here in the state of Iowa, with the exception of 1 farm outside of Ewing, Nebraska, which really messes with my story, but that's okay. It's a great farm. We have 1,200 employees. We have around 650 additional contractors. We work with 1,700 farmers that receive manure from us. We are the largest family-owned production company on the globe and the 4th largest here in the U.S. So proud to be Iowa and U.S. pork producers, but as you can see, we have a huge stake here in Iowa, and so we know that we have a huge responsibility to, produce food sustainably and efficiently, but also be cognizant of some of the political and social pressures that come with just having so much concentration here in the state. All right, next slide. So within our sustainability plan, I talked about we have 4 pillars, and within each pillar we would have 3 to 8 targets, right? And so I really want to hone in on the target that we established 18 months ago. Somebody else can correct my timeline. But we really wanted to pursue third-party assessment of the impact of hog manure on soil and society. And so you'll hear me say that a lot. How does manure impact soil, and how does it impact, what good does it bring to society? And so the Pork Board really launched this program for producers to opt into, and that was called the sustainability analysis. So we jumped on that. We understood the public perceptions and the narrative that was happening in our state of Iowa and in other areas of U.S. pork production, that livestock producers and hog manure was negatively impacting water quality and downstream drinking water. So how many of you are here in the state of Iowa, have lived here, have read all the articles and understood the environmental activist groups saying hog manure is impacting our drinking water? So very contentious issue. It's died down a little bit, but it has absolutely not gone away. And it's been very, very hard to find our voice as livestock producers because it's complicated, right? We don't want to disparage farmers using commercial producers. We didn't have in particular, some of the data, the third-party data that we needed. We had a lot of great research, we had a lot of farmer testimonials, but these reports helped us get some footing around the value that manure does have to both soil and society. So we were able to work with 14 of our farmers that we provide manure to. We were able to capture 163 fields for our sustainability reports. I've seen Randy's slide deck, and I know he's going to go through in detail what the primary data was and what the outcomes were. Our reports were very similar, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we used these reports, but overall, big shocker, manure is great for soil and society. It increases carbon soil. Our soil conditioning indexes were on a positive trajectory. That's a great story to hear. Our soil erosion rates were 9 times lower than Iowa and national averages as reported by the NRCS. And we saved about over 1,556 tons of soil from erosion. So what a great story. What a great story to have, and what great information to be armed with, especially as a communicator. So next slide. Shortly after we did the SEC reports, the sustainability analysis reports, we established the Smart Soil Partnership Program. And so this allowed us to further work with our farming partners across the state of Iowa and say, hey, I think a winning combination here is using hog manure as a fertilizer and implementing conservation practices. And so we're now actively working with our partners to establish in-field and more so edge-of-field conservation practices, in particular working with the Batch and Build program here in the state of Iowa. So we're also part of several climate smart grants where we're able to capture and receive funding. We're also able, partnering with different public-private partnerships to get incentives for farmers to implement batch and builds and to implement conservation practices. And we also know data and research is so important. So we have an in-house research team, and we partner externally to do research on anywhere from variability of manure and how we get manure to be a more consistent product, to interacting and helping out with life cycle assessments with the pork board, because those are so important. And now I'll put on my, next slide please, my communication hat, because that's my true passion and skill set, is how we use this information to share with our customers, our stakeholders, Iowans, and the greater consumers about the benefits of hog manure. And so I've tried to tally all of the pieces that I've written about my said favorite subject, manure, and it's almost south of 50 for sure, but we've done a lot of profiles on our nutrient applicators, our farmers, our environmental services team. We don't give them enough sunlight at Iowa Select Farms. They're out there working with all of our applicators and all of our farmers, following forward stewardship and ensuring compliance of manure. But we try and put a lot of sunlight on the benefits of manure, on our soil health, the benefit to the farmer, and the benefit to the society. As these reports will show you, you have less soil erosion. Healthier soil equals less soil erosions, which equals a better protection of water quality, which is such a good message, especially here in the state of Iowa, where the narrative, again, has largely been hog farmers are polluting our waterways, and we know that's not true. So we do a lot of communications, in partnership with the industry and coming out of Iowa Select Farms, and so happy to add you to our newsletter list. You can catch up with me afterwards, but the SEC reports and the work that the Pork Board is doing is really helping us find our voice and have that third-party data that's so critical and essential.
All right, thank you, Jen. So yeah, that was a fantastic outline of what you've done and what Iowa Select has done in the space of sustainability, and really highlighted that need for that data to get to that proof point for our producers to be able to show what they're doing on farm. So in the pork industry, we talk about public trust and sustainability, and we believe that to get to that public trust, we use the process of going through our principles, our practices, and our proof to build that public trust. And we have the principles, right? We have the We Care ethical principles that Jen mentioned and that we've built upon for 15 years now. So We Care ethical principles have been in our industry. You've heard about them. We've integrated them into everything that we do. We have our practices on farm. We have our training and certification programs, TQA, PQA, and the like, that we've also had in our industry for a long time. And so next step is to get to that proof. So what is that data, that proof that we're using to build to that public trust, or as we're talking about today, our legacy? So to talk about the data and the proof and having that discussion, I'm going to introduce Randy Spronk as our next panelist. Randy is a pork producer and farmer from Pipestone, Minnesota, and also NPPC past president. Randy, alongside his brother Gordon and son Seth, farms 2,550 acres of corn and beans and marketed 265,000 butcher hogs in 2022. Spronk Brothers Holdings have a ownership in 4 sow farms, an on-farm feed mill, finishing spaces, and shares in a pork slaughtering plant. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'd want to just follow up a little quickly with the prior presentation. If you're a crop farmer, the buzzword in crop production is biologicals. And I'm going to tell you animal manure is the original biological that we need to promote it as a biological for soil health because of the contents of that manure. I'm going to give you the real world of how this data's been used from a practical standpoint and experience. I'm going to change up the title of the presentation here a little. To me, it's about maintaining our farm social license. It's about proving to society through the food chain what we do on the farm and every day. I'm not afraid to measure. I'm not afraid to be transparent, and I want to show them and gain the trust from society that I'm doing the right things for society. And I believe that the data that we've got here can be used to show that. I had an opportunity here to go to the WTO, the World Trade Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. The impetus behind that presentation was to push back against the Europeans on using technology and innovation in food production. And it was really interesting. Had 12 farmers. 10 of them were actually virtually. You had a farmer from Saskatchewan that gave his presentation. There was another soybean farmer from North Dakota, from Australia, from South America. 2 of us were in person at the WTO in Geneva. One was the EU and one was me as a farmer from the United States. And so it's really interesting. I'm going to show you a little story here of why I want to do what I do, because I do believe there are people that are misleading what we do each and every day. So the guy right before me was from the EU. He was not a farmer. He was a bureaucrat and this is actually called the Barillo Pyramid. It's not his exact one that he had, but this is what he brought up in front of the WTO about food production. If you look on your left-hand side, it's the food pyramid. If you look right at the really top, it's meats at the top. And he actually had a nomenclature right beside it that said, eat less. With no data, no anything else. And then you look on your right-hand side, which is the environmental one, meat is on the top side, and basically bad for the environment. A little bit of the same thing in the prior presentation was talking about what they do. And so this is the European Union. This is what they're showing as their society, and I'm telling you that's wrong in my standpoint. So my presentation right after there again, I heavily use the SEC data from my farm through Pork Board. You're seeing the reports. I've got one individually from my farm. And so right away, went right to the data. This is my farm's data. We've actually are from 2020, 21, and 22. I'm showing you my carbon sequestration. I'm showing you my net greenhouse gas emissions. And the interesting thing about this is it's tailor-made for my farm. I'm from southwestern Minnesota at 1,700 feet elevation. I have a very short growing season. I have different soil types than what's in central Iowa. And so this is using my geographic location, my climate condition to be able to calculate, and my tillage practices and farming practices of what I'm doing. I'll be honest with you, when I got the first report in 2020, I was just happy. I'm going, we kind of really wanted to, where are we? Are we a carbon neutral, pork? Can we actually do that? And I'm going, I hadn't changed any of my management practices, hadn't adopted anything. I didn't do cover crops. I was some minimum till, but actually, I'm actually sequestering carbon. It's positive. I'm good for society. And then you talk about net greenhouse gases. I'm actually lower than what they have. And so it's very positive. But then you can see the progression that went on. Because I measured, because I benchmarked, I actually changed my management practices. I actually started doing more cover crops. I actually started doing less tillage. It's really interesting. I've been participatory on the environmental side in the checkoff for many years. You'll see some of the data that we had, but we did the original life cycle analysis of pork way back when. The simplistic dirt under his fingernails farmer terminology. There's two hot spots: how you handle your manure and how you grow your crops. And I think what we're realizing right here is this is the crop portion of it here. You'll see it later on, further down the slide. How we raise our feed is 2/3 of our footprint. And that's why this is important. That's why we're cooperating with corn and soybean producers, because we know that this is very important. How our American corn and soybean farmers grow our feed is very important to the sustainability story that we have the ability to say. And I think when you get in front of a group like I was in front of 130 countries at the WTO, it's very important to simplify some metrics. You're talking about fewer tons of CO2 emitted. You're talking about tons of soil carbon sequestered. You're talking about soil that's saved. And so this is really for the social side of it here, that you can go to society and show the positive things about what we're doing on the farm. And there again, we're benchmarking, we set goals, and so we can be very transparent what we're doing on the farm. And so there again, this is my farm's data. This isn't everybody aggregated in here, but this is me defending my social license, showing to society what I'm doing on the farm each and every day, and explaining what I do and telling that I'm good for society, producing a safe, affordable, sustainable protein. Again, benchmarking. I can actually benchmark my data, Sprunk Brothers, up against Minnesota. I can up against the national average. And there again, we've come from the nutrition side where you're always measuring feed conversion, you're measuring gain, and I think we need to take to that same here as we do our production practices on the feed that we raise each and every day. Then we take it to the aggregate data. And so there again, this is the preliminary data from our data. You've seen this all before here. That's come from our original life cycle analysis here. I'm going to be honest with you, the data here is from, I think it was 2018 here. But if you look at the data that I had, there was in 20, 21, and 22. We as an industry should have more up-to-date information showing our progress, showing each and every, this is what we did last year, this is what we're doing this year, this is what we're doing following years. I do also need to be able to, you've all seen the data of 18%, that's an incorrect data. This is the factual one that actually agriculture is responsible for 10%. Swine production is only 4%, so you really got to quantify what portion are we realistically do. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, our We Care principles here, this is the bedrock of it. This is the goals and principles that we've had in there. I don't think I need to say that to you, but where we stand. What's really unique is when you look at the pork industry's commitments and goals, we do 15 out of the 17 out of the United Nations, so we really align with society on what we're doing and what we're measuring, and so we can actually show to them the things they're concerned about. Obviously, this would be the initial year of data, of aggregate, as what we've done here. Here again, you saw my farm. Well, now you're seeing what we can do as an industry as a whole to show how much soil we're saving, how much nitrogen saved, how much phosphorus saved. I think this is what we need to do for our social license and maintaining that social license and our ability and freedom to operate by actually showing society, and there again, disproving that earlier Barillo Pyramid that I saw where they're denigrating what we are doing without factual information. Can you see the correlation of what he showed earlier on and that being negative on animal production? And I'm telling him he's incorrect, and I think that's our responsibility, not only as producers, and I think that's one of the key things. As a producer, I shouldn't tell a staff person to defend me. I shouldn't report somebody else, fix this problem. I should take that underneath and do it myself. And I think that's what every producer, by doing this, doing your own farm, you can take a responsibility for defending your own freedom to operate, and you can actually, the industry as a whole. So this is really a sidebar to it, but really what we went there for was, it was GMO. You're hearing what's happening in Mexico on GMO. That's very important to us as we raise our feed. We're talking about antibiotics, we're talking about growth promoters, and so there again, measuring what we do and utilizing technology and innovation to raise food, which we want to be able to defend using these to be sustainable as we raise our food here. It's been mentioned earlier, I think it's very important that we talk about setting goals and setting metrics here. I think that's what about measuring, being transparent, and actually not only where we are here today, you saw my graphs, I can make my decisions as I move forward and actually set a goal. Where do we want to be for carbon sequestration? So I know I've gone way over. I apologize. So.
You're fantastic. Thanks, Randy. We appreciate that. Now we're going to turn to have a little different perspective. So next we're going to turn to Sam Wildman. Sam serves as Senior Program Officer of Livestock and Feed Systems for the World Wildlife Fund. He comes from an 8-generation family farm and uses his experience in production agriculture, business consulting, stakeholder facilitation, and project management to guide his work. His position at World Wildlife Fund allows him to use his passion for livestock, conservation, and rural communities to drive transformative impact across meat, milk, and egg value chain. Thanks for being here.
I don't have any slides, so we'll see how this goes. It's an honor to be here. I grew up in the pig industry, like Stephanie said, in Ohio on our farrow to finish operation. Worked in agritourism in the pork industry as well before starting my career after college. Actually paid for college power washing hog barns. So this is kind of full circle for me. My first experience at Pork Expo was 10 years ago. Came out as a college student to do social media training with the checkoff team. And so I was driving in this morning, and it amazes me how far we've come as an industry and as society, right, to meet the demand of society and the expectations of sharing your story. It used to be about transparency, and social media was a tool to do that, right? And it still is in a lot of ways. But this discussion about principles, practices, and proof and data is the next evolution of that, in my opinion, of being able to share the story, like Randy said, with credibility to what's happening on the farm every day and how that matters, not just to the farm, but to the planet, to society, and to the economics of the operation as well. So it's great to be here. You stole my favorite Dallasism, as I call them, of principles, practices, and proof. The other thing Dallas taught me when I was young, Dallas Hockman, was whenever possible, be the last one with the microphone. So thanks for putting me last. I just want to share a couple of thoughts, I guess. I love the story that these two folks have told, and I completely respect it, and I love the approach that the We Care application has taken. The strategy around the ethical principles is so solid, right? But I want to ensure everyone that these are good tools. They are just tools, though, right? They're only as good as we enable them to be by using them. At the World Wildlife Fund, we spend a lot of time talking about climate change and climate impacts and ecosystem impacts as a whole. But in my work across livestock species, it becomes more challenging because it's a system, right? It's a system, and we have to manage for a whole system. It's not just carbon. It's water quality, water use, and water risk. Land use, biodiversity above ground and below ground. There's so many things from the environmental side that go into that. Carbon is an exciting one today and a great place to start, but it's by no means the only thing, right? And with a background in pig production and farming, I understand that it's not the only thing that Randy looks at when he's out in the field or when he's making management decisions on the farm. But we have to be sure that as we tell that story, we're telling that full story about how we manage the whole system. Just like in the pig side, on the live ops side, right? Animal welfare is not the whole story. There's so much that goes into that, from genetics and nutrition and health and biosecurity and so many other things. We have to continue to bring those pieces together and make it easy for producers like you to share that story of your operation as well. My cheat sheet says that what's really important today, I think, is efficiency, right, Randy? Especially in our market environment today and as a global system. Efficiency is really important. On the environmental side, that often comes across with the word intensity, like carbon intensity, greenhouse gas intensity, water use efficiency, some of those kinds of terms. Efficiency is a really important metric to keep in mind, and it's a great way to make management decisions. But as WWF, managing for the whole ecological landscape, we really need to also be looking at and encouraging producers and livestock systems and value chains, end-use customers, consumers, everyone. We need to be thinking about also what are the absolute impacts. It's not just your carbon footprint per acre, it's your absolute emissions, it's your absolute water use. How are we enabling systems to use less water, to be more efficient then, right? So we really, just like we sometimes get carbon tunnel vision, we sometimes get efficiency tunnel vision. And it's really important that as we go into this kind of journey of looking at data, that we keep that in mind, that there's really two outcomes that we need to be looking at, efficiencies and absolutes. So I'll stop there and we'll go to questions or whatever you want to talk about.
All right, sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate that, and certainly appreciate the point that you made about none of these measurements are really made in a vacuum, right? None of these decisions are truly made in a vacuum. And so that's really part of the sustainability story that we've been telling. Even in my area of animal welfare, right? Historically, we have looked at animal welfare through a science lens, through a technology lens, and how are we impacting the farm? And now when we're talking about animal welfare, we're talking about it through the lens of sustainability. How are these different areas that we're talking about under the We Care ethical principles, how are they working off of each other? How are they impacting each other? When we're looking at making welfare decisions on the farm, how are we impacting our sustainability of that farm, our resources, our inputs of that, or impacts on the environment? So that's certainly a conversation that we're having up and down the supply chain now as we're talking about these metrics and as this data is being shared out. So Sam, your group, World Wildlife Fund, and the others that have spoken here today, really it sounds like partnerships with different organizations have truly had an impact on you and really furthered a lot of what you're doing. So I want to give you guys an opportunity to expand a little bit about that, talk about the partnerships that you've had, what's really helped your organization and your producers gather this data and participate in your programs. So whoever wants to go first.
I can tell you from my standpoint, it becomes collecting the data. I basically told SEC, I don't want to keep a notebook to write everything down. I want it inherently recorded every day. We've always been early adopters. You talk about technology and innovation. Literally all my planting data, spraying data, combine data, tillage data is actually wirelessly loaded to the cloud. I was in Mexico City 2 weeks ago, and I could actually see the monitor in my planter tractor in Minnesota because of technology. And so really I just turned over my John Deere Operations Center to SEC, but it's interesting that got noticed by the equipment manufacturers, and they're going, well, why are you collecting this data? Why do you want it? And actually John Deere saw my farm report, and so they've actually made adaptations and actually, encouragement, well, why should I be using a book value on what my carbon sequestration is? You should be able to, based on the speed and the depth of my tillage tool, be able to custom tailor, that I'm rewarded for what I do, not some book value that's happened. So I think really from a standpoint of crop production, you're really at the beginning edge of it here, where you could actually have an in-field sensor to be able to, and then do a calculation right on the screen within the tractor that it'll show you based on the adjustments of your machine, what you're going to do for the environmental. So I think we're really on the front edge of it here. So not only because of the data collection with SEC, manufacturers have noticed what we're doing and why are you doing this? And you're saying, well, I'm producing a product that I want to be able to show society what I'm doing. And so I need the proof, I need to measure, I need to have the metrics. So it's been an enjoyable fun to be able to be part of that, to be able to change that.
I would just add the old Indian proverb that if you want to do something quickly, do it yourself. If you want to go further and have it be more effective and successful, you have to do it together. And so I'm quite sure I butchered that, but you get what I'm trying to say. If you want to go fast, you do it yourself. And partnerships take a lot more time. Sometimes painfully so, and sometimes if you find the right partner, you can move, at a faster pace if you've built that trust and you both know what you're bringing to the table. But I would just say there's a lot of organizations and people out there all trying to go to the same place, right? And I mean, I would just say, you know, look at our what we're trying to start up with batch and builds. Our partners are, you know, IDOLS, NRCS. The Iowa Pork Producers is kicking in an incentive. We're trying to leverage the relationships with our farming partners, and so that's just a couple partners of many others that need to be involved in that work, just to get, you know, saturated buffers and bioreactors installed. And that's a hard sell to a farmer. I mean, if you look at what the nutrient reduction strategy in Iowa has tried to do over the last 10 years, it is a hard sell. So we got to keep working at it and keep moving the needle. But partnerships are definitely, you know, the way to go on many of these initiatives. And many, you know, we have to look internally, like Randy said, and say, how are we going to get better? How are we going to measure? How are we going to drive forward as a system? You know, how are we going to reduce mortality and increase survivability? Because, you know, you look at, you know, mortality on our farms. It's a real part of pork production, but I mean, you talk about driving sustainability forward is getting those pigs across the finish line. And so there's a lot of work involved in just that space with our research partners and our suppliers and vendors and our pharmaceutical companies and our vet clinics and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I would just, I'm all across the board here, but I would just champion, you know, any producer that says, just raise your hand, because there's people out there that want to help you and take a piece of the load and work together with you.
Yeah, sustainability is a journey, right?
It's a journey.
It's often referred to as a journey, not a destination, that you never arrive. And that leads us into this discussion of continuous improvement and always looking to get better and be better, in my opinion, which is why we have to look at things other than just efficiencies. But partnerships are core to that, or foundational to sustainability. It's not something that is built to be or intended to be go alone. It's limited if that's the case. So my job at WWF is to build bridges between the environmental community on a global scale, really, but in North America primarily, to build bridges between what they see and understand and are looking at in science and data and research, right? And then connect that with the context of why things happen the way they happen in the livestock systems or in the production systems on the cropping side, whatever it may be. And that leads to all kinds of innovative partnerships. We need, in my opinion, we need a proliferation of partnerships and collaboration beyond what we think we can do or who we think we need. Jen mentioned a lot of important stakeholders that make a production system work, right? Yesterday I was in this room listening to a panel with Alltech and Microsoft. Who would have thought, right? 10 years ago, who would have thought Microsoft on the farm talking about data, technology, right? Many of the service providers in the room, in the trade show here, right? Sustainability is becoming more and more mainstream in the business, and as it integrates into the business, it creates new value for the whole value chain and for the whole system, and really it is an enabler for us to do better on the farm and at the farm level. It's not just something, it can be used, but it's not just something for marketing's sake. It's not just something that is intended to push pharmaceuticals or technology or infrastructure or whatever, right? It's really to enable these systems to work better together. So yeah, partnerships are core to it.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, I loved that you mentioned that sustainability is a journey, right? And we're all on this sustainability path, and we're all in different areas of this, different stages of our journey, and bringing in different partners, you know, like Microsoft and Alltech, like you just mentioned. We've come pretty far in these areas, like surprisingly far. It's fantastic to be able to share what we've done. But Jen and Randy, from the producer's perspective, you all are obviously pretty far down your sustainability journey. And so like for you to look back, talk to us about how you started the sustainability journey, what your process was, what your reasons were, kind of what's your why for getting started on this journey, and any recommendations or feedback you could give to other producers in the room who are looking to start that journey.
Yeah, well, we, when did we start this? I guess I can't remember quite the time frame, but I remember the discussions of starting with, well, let's capture what we're already doing and talk about it. And so I think that sustainability for us is really being able to articulate our business plan. All of those things that we do as part of those 4 areas and the targets and metrics we have is our business plan. We didn't just come up with, some magic fairy dust to do a marketing spin on it. When we talk about, people care, we have to recruit and retain and engage our workforce. Period, right? We cannot produce hogs without an engaged workforce. And so all of those things that we do within that space are part of our sustainability plan. If you look at animals, we're looking at, our production well-being program, survivability, our internal and external audits and assessments, all of our working groups, all of our task forces, all of our training, pig care training, all of those things are essential to our business. That's our sustainability plan for animal care, community care. We run that through the Deb and Jeff Hansen Foundation. We serve all the communities where we have farms and peoples living. That is our sustainability plan. So you understand what I'm saying. It's what we were doing. We needed to capture that in a compelling way, but then start measuring, assigning goals, and driving that forward. And so that was the start of what we called sustainability. Let's talk about what we're doing. And here's where the communications come in, take credit for it, and share that story. Identify who our stakeholders are for Iowa Select Farms and the pork industry. So what's an industry stakeholder? You have your employees, you have your contractors, you have your manure customers, you have your nutrient applicators, you have your lawmakers, you have your community thought leaders, you have your foundation partners. And so if you think about whether you're big or small or anywhere in between, you have stakeholder groups that are important to your business. They have a stake in what you do. And so we started communicating to them. We started openly sharing our story. We started having employees and people champion those efforts and initiatives. And so that's where we started with sustainability. Now we have a working group across our senior leadership team that has eyes and ears and a focus on continuing to drive those 4 areas forward. What can we do still in this very economically challenging year that we're all having? What can we keep moving forward, keep driving forward? Like Randy said, efficiency is the name of the game, survivability is the name of the game, but all the reduction of inputs falls right into place. It is not only sustainable, but it also helps us survive as a business and be resilient. So it's really core to our central business plan. It's not this fancy, shiny thing hanging out here that we're doing just to get attention. It's very core to our business plan. It's very necessary, very critical.
1989, writing the feedlot rules in the state of Minnesota, which land of 10,000 lakes.
Yeah.
It's basically about water quality. And at that time, it was just focused on water quality. To the National Air Emission Study, when we were talking about, what are our gases that are released off a barn and what's happening here. So we've been very active about, but what you realized, exactly what was mentioned early, is it's not about one thing. You squeeze the balloon in one area. We need to understand when we make a decision over here, what impact does it have over here? And I think that's the overarching broad that kind of brings into it is what's sustainable. It's not just considering water quality. It's not just considering air quality or carbon footprint. It's what actions do we take? How do we use, we're entrusted with the resources. How do we take those resources and best use them that we can each and every day, trying to lower in each one of those categories or increase quality in each one, but it's not that simple because there is, impacts in other areas that we don't consider. That's what was always in my father and grandfather's bucket. Society just entrusted them to make the right decision. And that's part of it here. We need to regain that trust with society. We need to measure, we need to show, we need to benchmark, and we need to be able to show them, because it is a journey, and we just want to be on that path continually to improve.
Absolutely, path to continuous improvement. We hear that theme over and over when we talk about all these programs. Go ahead.
As a sustainability practitioner, in the corporate side of the industry or in large companies, we often talk about materiality, and that's kind of a fancy word for what's important to who. And Jen mentioned who, right? You have internal stakeholders to your business and external stakeholders as you think about society, as you impact them. The pork industry, I don't remember if there was ever a formal materiality assessment, but the reality is the We Care ethical principles are what that would show, right? And you can get more granular, but it's those big buckets, right, of animal care, our people, the environment or the planet. Economics is important, right? Worker safety and food safety. So it's starting there at a industry level, but at a farm level, like my dad's farm in Ohio, what's important, right? And just start with that. What are you already doing? What are you already collecting data on? You know, how much data, think about it, how much data goes into what you guys fill out for a We Care application or for common swine industry audit, right? There's immense data and understanding right there already that I think it was said earlier, we have to start by ensuring that credit is given where it's due, right? And the journey didn't start today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about We Care ethical principles quite a bit here, right? We talked about those 6 that we've had in our industry for 15 years now, and it's been baked into the different programs and certification and trainings that we've had. And we've seen with Iowa Select here how they've started to match some of the foundational principles that our producers have had on their farm for a long time. And on an industry perspective, right, as we're laddering up, aggregating this data from the farm to the organization, to the state, to the national level, talking about sustainability, we're able to match up these ethical principles with the rest of our supply chain. So we're focusing on the sustainability here on the production side, on the farm and in the field, and now we're able to share this information on down the supply chain. And we see too that we match it very well there, right? I'm talking with NAMI, so talking with our packers and processors, their sustainability database is called Protein Pact, and we match up very, very neatly with those principles and those data pieces there to be able to share that data on down the supply chain. And then even on the international level, as you shared, Randy, matching up with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, right? Matching up very, very well with how we're talking about sustainability on all these different levels. So, Sam, from your perspective at World Wildlife Fund, you don't just work with the pork industry, right? Yeah. So you're working with lots of different species and lots of different livestock groups. Tell us what you're seeing from pork, how we're comparing to some of these other groups, and maybe any other areas of opportunity or encouragement that you can provide to us.
Sure, happy to. It's well, first, it's hard, right? Because systems are so different. Poultry, right? The business models are different. The marketing mechanisms are different. Poultry, dairy, beef, right? Number of animals. It's very different. It's not an easy thing to do. And I also, I try not to compare, right? I know we all want to be the leaders in protein production. We all want to be responsible stewards and seen as leaders and as responsible stewards as well. But there's some real strengths to what the pork industry is doing by taking a producer-first, producer-driven approach with the on-farm sustainability reports and finding ways to aggregate that data and over time, ideally, right, create a value proposition for producers and with producers that aligns it to what the meat industry needs and the retail sector and so on, right? Real strength in that producer-driven approach. The metrics, keeping it incredibly simple as to where to get started and what to measure is really important. Some have done it really well. Some have done it down a different path, I guess. But moving forward in a voluntary manner is so important, right? And all the proteins that I've worked with in North America, at least, have really tried to rise to the occasion of creating opportunity for producers and livestock systems to do that. Crops too, but it's very different.
Absolutely, yeah. I know our producers and our task forces focused on sustainability and building out these goals and metrics, really focused on making sure that the metrics are going to be impactful, but also simple enough and easy enough to access that we can actually get this data into these systems. So certainly, thank you all very much.